Welcome to episode 8 of the Scale Model Podcast. My name is Stuart Clark. In this podcast, I aim to entertain, inform, and promote the hobby of scale model kit building with interviews, reviews, and news about the hobby. My guest today is a gentleman I remember reading his blog for the last couple of years. Always been interested in the stuff he's got. And he is Jim Bates. He's an expat Canadian now living in Seattle. He builds RCAF, RCN, U.S. Navy, and Commonwealth aircraft in 1/72nd scale. Jim is an avid reader and sometimes writer, a fan of rock, folk, and jam bands, and a private pilot. When he's not exploring one of the many museums, parks, and libraries of Puget Sound with his wife and daughter, Jim is a practicing attorney and is working on a book about the RCAF use of the Hawker Hurricane. Welcome to the podcast, Jim.
Thanks for having me.
Well, yeah, like I said, I've been reading your blog for a while. I know you took a little bit of a break. Life gets in the way in that, but I've always enjoyed reading the posts and some of your views on things.
Well, thank you very much. There are days I wonder why I do it, and there's days that it seems like a really good idea.
Well, exactly. I kind of feel the same sometimes as well. All right, let's get right into the hobby news. A couple of things out from for Royal Navy fans, particularly fans of the flying boats. Neomega is to release a mixed media kit of a McTaggart Scott designed cruiser aircraft catapult carriage. That's a long word. Handy for displaying if you have an Airfix Walrus. This looks really neat. Little white metal etch parts, stuff like that. Have you built any flying boats?
I have not actually.
No.
Being a 72nd guy, that Walrus does interest me, but have not picked it up. It's a little big.
Yeah, it is. I've got a Sunderland flying boat, an old Airfix one in the stash, and at some point I got to figure out what I want to do with it. But again, it's nice to see some other additional products coming out. Again, some different possibilities for people to do this. Moving on, Fine Molds. They're releasing 3 versions again in 48 scale of the Mitsubishi Ki-15 in 48 scale. I know there's quite a few fans of Japanese World War II aircraft, so this looks like quite an interesting set of builds they're going to do. Again, any other comment on this?
I just think it's a pretty attractive airplane and very 1930s.
Exactly. Yeah,
love the radial engines with the spats and wheel pants. Exactly.
No, looks like it's going to be a good one. Okay, moving on. The Modeling Renews reports on Revell's November release. Whole bunch of different things as always. I've been reading some things online about some of these are really highly regarded. We'll start with the Mirage 3E, 1/32nd scale, 366 parts, about 60 euros. Again, if you're a fan of French Air Force stuff, very attractive decal scheme, and you're also going to be able to build it with the engine out on a full-on engine cart. So for people who like to do that, again, looks like it's going to be a very attractive kit. 2 versions actually, one for the French Air Force and one for the Australian Air Force. So nice looking kit for that scale. Moving on, a Bf 109 F2 in 1/72nd scale, about 10 euros, rather attractive looking. Again, we've got, just like Spitfires, there's a million versions of the 109, but I know people absolutely love to build it. Just one option for decals there, but again, good looking small kit to start things off. Also 1/72nd scale, the Yak 3, similar price, similar part count. They call these level 3 kits, but they look like they could be a good starter kit for someone. Revell makes some very nice stuff out of Germany. Yep. Sorry, you were saying?
Yeah. They've been kind of hard to get here in the U.S. Mm-hmm. I noticed you guys still have them in Canada, but once Revell ran into their troubles, we don't really have any way to get a lot of the new Revell stuff right now.
Yeah,
hopefully coming back into the country soon.
I do know they're working on that. I've been hearing some stuff. I've been trying to get contact with some other people on the industry side just to confirm when some stuff's coming in. But I have heard that their plan is to get them back into North America. So.
And I think both both these Yak 3 and 109 are actually Russian snap-tight kits originally.
Interesting.
That were Reebok. I think Zavedza did them originally. And
Ah.
I have seen the Yak 3, and it is really nice looking.
Okay, so then maybe that explains why that's a level 3. They're calling it that. So, good to know. I know it's so funny now in our industry how we have so many Reeboxes and things like that. It's really at times tough to keep up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Okay, moving on. We've got 135th scale. You want to try the pronunciation on this? Now
Leave that to you.
Exactly. Yeah, it was used by the Federal German Army from the 60s to the 80s. Looks very Russianish. It's just these sort of things I just see it. I think old World War II Russian tank destroyers. But again, easy to assemble vinyl tracks, 90 millimeter cannon, good number of part counts, about 30 euros. Looks like it'll be a very attractive one if you're into that. Now, here's one I know a lot of people, because I like aircraft just like you've been talking about. Their Bristol Beaufighter, the 148 scale, 188 parts, 40 euros. This, again, this is a very attractive looking kit. Just looking at the scheme here really makes me want to consider it. So, full cockpit, gunner's cabin, detailed tail wheel. A separate rudder. Tailplane with separate elevators, fully detailed engines, even comes with a torpedo. So two different models. Yeah, this looks like it could be very attractive, eh?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Beaufighter. One of my writing projects I did, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, was there was actually an African American Canadian pilot who flew Beaufighters with 404 Squadron.
Excellent.
And his name was Al Bundy, and we hear all about the Tuskegee Airmen, but nobody really ever talks about him. And he flew both torpedoes, and Beaufighter's always been a favorite of mine.
Right. Yeah. No. Very attractive looking aircraft. So yeah, the decal set will be 489 and 254 in the RAF. But as we know, there's a lot of aftermarket decal makers. You could make this up to a very nice looking whatever you want. Also, going back to armor, they've got a Russian battle tank T-14, 135th scale. It's the most modern battle tank what they have here. Remote control turret. This 125 millimeter gun is actually loaded automatically. Previous Russian armor's done that as well. But again, looks very attractive looking for those of you that like modern scale Russian armor. Okay, moving on to a nautical theme. They've got the U-boat Type 2B from 1943, 1/144 scale. Attractive looking sub for those of you who like building the submarines. Apparently there were 6 of them that were used by the German Navy. Looks like a fairly attractive looking stand and everything. Again, I've never built a sub, but I know from seeing them at shows and that there's a whole different skill set and all that. So kind of neat.
Yeah, I was in Chicago a few weeks ago and got to see the U-boat there, and the museum actually had a reboxing, I think, of an old monogram kit that they were selling branded of their as the U-505, and I actually picked that up.
Oh, yeah?
I've always been attracted to these Revell submarines, but 172nd, as we've been talking about, is just big. So it's nice to see them doing in 1144.
Yeah, exactly. You need something a little bit smaller. That's one thing the ship modelers have. I know we were talking before we went on the air about large-scale aircraft, but at least with the ship stuff, when you build them in that large scale, you don't have to have as much width. You just have to have the length to throw them up somewhere on a shelf.
Right.
So, okay, moving on to Italeri. Their new November releases. We're starting with a car here. The Renault 5 Alpine, your little small car, was produced from the beginnings of the 70s to the first half of the 80s. I remember seeing these when I was a kid. I'd go back to England and you get the French tourists over. A lot of these. But again, a classy little car if you're a fan of it. Looks like it's going to be really, really good. Now under the category, and this is one I've thought, I'm sure this was done before, but this is, for those of you of a certain age, you'll remember the movie Top Gun. Well, Itali's, I'm sure these have to be Reeboxes. They produced a combined set of an F-14A and an A4F, basically with the, with the decal options from the movie. So yeah, interesting little choice. I know we keep hearing rumors about a Top Gun 2 movie coming out. So again, I'm wondering what prompted this.
I'm just more amazed that the cover painting is basically flat out of the movie. That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
I wonder if Hollywood is okay with this, if they got it all licensed and stuff. That's a lawyer and me talking, but yeah, that's a neat little
exactly.
boxing.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, I've always like the Skyhawk, and on my list is an aggressor scheme at some point. So, but yeah, for those of you who like that and who remember seeing the movie, if not, go back and see the movie and have a chuckle.
Exactly.
Of a very young Tom Cruise. Moving on back to cars, 124th. The car guys love. There's a whole subset of guys who just love the rally cars. This is a Fiat rally car. I don't know too much about it. It obviously was very, very popular. Very attractive looking scheme in a multiple shades of blue. Box art shows it happily racing through the snow. I know if I was doing that, I'd have it into a tree in no time. But
Exactly.
that's just me. But again, very, very attractive looking. Looks like it'll be good value. About 30 euros. Good size. So again, moving on. F5. Sorry.
It looks like you'll have to test your decal skills looking at the decal sheet.
Yeah.
That's impressive. All the stripes are in decals.
Yeah, no kidding. Half of me would just say I'll just mask it, but
Yeah.
for those that will, as long as the decals are in good shape, I think it'll work out well. Okay, then moving on, Swiss Air Force F5 in 1/72nd scale. Very attractive looking aircraft. Looks like they've got some nice different schemes, including some two commemorative schemes. Again, testing your decal skills, but it looks very, very nice. Nice little kit in that scale. I built. I'm trying to remember who the manufacturer was, but like 30 years ago, I built one of these in 72nd scale, and I was always surprised how small it was.
Yeah, I built a couple of the old Eschi F5As way back when. Well,
yeah.
It's an attractive little airplane.
Oh yeah, exactly. Well, it's like Canadian Air Force. We used them for a while.
Yep. I remember seeing when I was young flying around.
There you go. So next up for the truck guys, an Iveco Turbostar. This is an Italian lorry truck, whatever you want to call it. It was the most widespread industrial vehicle in Italy in the late 80s. This will come to you in 1/24 scale, 55 euros. Attractive looking scheme. Looks like some various decal options. Soft canvas top. Yeah. Again, not much. Again, I'm not a truck guy, but the guys that who build these tell me that this one's been people have been kind of waiting around for too. It's a overlooked one that they've done. And then moving on, we'll just briefly touch on this. Again, I remember these when I was a kid. Battle sets where you get a couple of tanks, a helicopter, a whole bunch of figures. You can make your little diorama in that. But they've basically upped the game. So this one's called a Vietnam War Operation Silver Bayonet. So this basically comes with, and these are all the buildings are mostly laser cut, MDF laser cut. Village house, a small village house, some various other buildings. You get 50 figures of Viet Cong, 50 figures of infantry, an M113 and an M48 tank kit, as well as a UH-1C chopper, all in one box, and you can make your own little diorama. So, and I'm just looking at it. It's actually, not half bad looking. I like what they've done with the helicopter and the rice paddy. Whoever built this.
Yeah, that's a really neat idea, and looks like, as you said, diorama in a box.
Yeah, exactly. And I can see some of the wargaming guys going for this.
Yeah,
sort of thing. Yeah. Everything's all there what they need. Okay, we're just going to finish up from Italeri. They've got a T-34-85 tank in 1/35 scale. It's a completely new tool model. They are promising the highest level of quality and details with interior details for the turret, driver compartment, transmission compartment, and the suspension. They've got some CADs on there. So again, much like Airfix, I think Italeri is trying to get out of the old stereotypes that people have for them. Yep. I haven't had a chance to ask some of my armor contacts about this yet, but it'll be interesting to see how it's received. There's a lot of competition in that 1/35 scale space, so we'll have to see what happens. Okay, moving on. Now this is kind of funny because when I was assembling the show, I had heard this next one is a Hawker Hurricane coming from Arma Hobby. And I remember reading about this a couple of weeks ago, and I added myself to the mailing list. And when I was putting the show notes together, I always invite my guests. I share the notes, and guests are invited to contribute. And I remember seeing this, and I went, "Did I put this in, or did Jim put this in?" Well, as it turned out, Jim did put this in. So we say great minds think alike. So Arma Hobbies, I believe they're from Poland, if I recall. They're coming out with a 1/72nd scale Hawker Hurricane Mark One. But they're also going to have it in two different boxings. So it's going to be an expert set for including all the super detailing, and just for a what they call a junior set, looking just for a quick build. And they're going to have this from 303 Squadron, which has a lot of history about it. And there's been some movies coming out. This looks like a really nice looking kit. I other than Spitfires, I love Hurricanes too, and I've built a ton of them over the years. And this is looking very nice. Jim, what caught your eye?
Well, I'm a huge Hurricane fan, and when we were talking at the beginning, you had talked about having a Lancaster up the street from you. Well, sometime in about, I think, 1984, I go to Hamilton the day before the air show, and they've just got this brand new Hawker Hurricane from England that they have purchased.
Yes.
And kind of fell in love with the airplane. And I've actually done a 3-series article about the RCAF use for them for IPMS Canada, and I'm working that into a book. And when Airfix did their Fabric Wing Hurricane in 72nd, I was excited and thinking, great, this is cool. They'll do the Metal Wing, and they never followed up with the Metal Wing in 72. They did a beautiful one in 48. So it's kind of one of those big holes of it'd be nice to have a new tool Metal Wing Hurricane to go with the Airfix Fabric one. And I was always surprised why Airfix never followed it up.
Yeah, it's funny the way some of the manufacturers work, as we're going to talk about in a few minutes. It's sometimes when they release something major and new, you get all the opinions come out about why, and there's usually a logic there. But yeah, I have to agree. I'm very surprised they never did. But this looks like it's going to be very attractive. I've been getting a regular email updates about this, so they're actually very much they want people's opinions. They're asking if there's something that you see that's wrong, let us know. So they're really reaching out to the community. So I'm really looking forward to this. I love what I'm wondering if the main picture here on the page is going to be the box art, because that's a very nice painting.
Yeah, it's very nice. Kind of a neat thing. And to work in a Canadian connection, the leader of 303 Squadron was Johnny Kent, who was a Canadian.
Right. Yeah, I do remember that name as well. So yeah, that'll be a fun one to build up as well. Okay, let's move on. Telford, UK Scale Model World. It's Europe's, what people think one of Europe's leading shows, just finished. We often have major new releases, much like at the Japanese shows. So couple of big news. Yeah, I know, and I haven't been drinking yet, so there you go. So Wingnut Wings, we previously talked about their release of the 1/32nd scale Lancaster. They actually had a mock-up of the Beast there, but they're also saying they're going to be releasing just the cockpit nose area. For those who don't have space for the entire kit, and I think that's just a fabulous idea. The link I've provided in the show notes does show you some pictures of it. The only thing that would make this absolutely perfect is if they also did what Hong Kong's doing and provide like one half of a clear fuselage or something.
Yeah, I like the idea. That was a kit that when they announced it, I'm like, oh man, I kind of want one of those. But I live in a condo and don't have room for a 1/32nd scale Lancaster. So somebody mentioned to me yesterday in passing, oh, they're doing just the cockpit. And I'm thinking, that would be cool. What I would like is a cockpit and one of the engines.
Yeah, that would be cool.
The engine on display with the cockpit and kind of have your own little museum display.
Very, very cool. Yeah, and I'd like to see more of this. I've touched upon other ones. Like for example, I've got an Airfix Sutherland flying boat, and I've got my grandfather worked on them during the war, and I've got the White Ensign interior set. And I'm realizing that I am going to have to make a decision, because there's no point doing all this if it gets promptly covered up. So at the moment, I'm looking at maybe doing a cutaway or something. But wouldn't it be neat if some of the manufacturers, particularly for these larger ones, did do this more and more, the clear option, because that's one thing I get. I know people that just do amazing job with photo etch and that in the interior, and quite often it then gets covered up. Like if you're happy about that, that's great. But I just don't see the point sometimes. So having the ability to actually display that fine work, both the molding and your own work, is definitely a plus.
Yeah, we had a gentleman we have a show each February at the Museum of Flight, which is a display-only show. It's not a contest, and we get a lot of models that come from the area. And a gentleman who did a beautiful job of a 1/48 monogram B29 that he fully tricked out the inside. And his solution was to kind of cut almost like comic book kind of circle holes in the side of the fuselage. It was very attractive. So much so it caught the eye of the curators of the museum who wanted it donated to the Museum of Flight. So I guess someday it'll end up in the Museum of Flight.
Awesome.
That was a unique way to do that, is cut the big holes in there and kind of show off, oh, here's all the work I did.
Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking about at some point. Right now there's a few bits of construction done, but that and the White Ensign set is currently sitting in the stash until I decide, what I'm going to do with that. Okay, also speaking of Wingnut, and also under the where the hell do you put it, they've also announced another new release from World War I, 132nd Handley Page 00400. This was a British heavy bomber from the First World War. And again, this one is an absolute monster. I've seen a picture from Telford where they show it kind of very close to the Lancaster, and it's similar in wingspan. Now, at least with this one, you can at least fold one of the wings. But again, from what I've been reading on the forums, and that this has a lot of people very much excited. Their World War I ones, the fact that there's rigging involved just terrifies me. So
yeah, I can't think of anything scarier than a 1/32 scale Handley Page 0400. Like that's the rigging, the putting those wings together, that just how you transport it once it's built. Like I'd never for the house.
Exactly, but again, the detail is as normal for their stuff, just absolutely gorgeous, and for the guys who enjoy doing that, more power to you. My hat's off to you. Okay, the big announcement, which has produced a lot of quote unquote discussion on the various modeling forums. Not that we might have debates on the internet about something, right?
Never have it.
Never. Airfix has announced their latest 1/24th offering, and this is a Grumman F6F -5 Hellcat. Nice looking kit, excellent amount of detail. I've thrown a link up on the Airfix site. There's actually quite a bit of behind the scenes video and stuff like that, which is also very much worth a watch because it really goes into how they come up with this. I guess as it turns out, they got this, they actually got photos and they got to scan, I believe it's the one at the Smithsonian. Wow. The actual aircraft. So they had some, they got some very good source material, shall we say, and being able to work on this. And again, I'm not a World War II U.S. Navy expert, but from what people are telling me, it's looking very nice. A lot of popular support for it. Again, you've got the griping about why don't they release this? Why don't they release that? But right. I've always said, they have a reason. They don't just randomly do this. They realize there's obviously a lot of demand. They predict probably mostly North America and overseas, because that's where the markets are now. And I think if they put in Royal Navy or a British decal set in there as well, that'll probably do it as well. But again, a gorgeous kit. What do you think?
I was actually really surprised by it when I first heard it, because I do build the U.S. Navy things, not 1/24th, and I thought, why wouldn't you do a Corsair? Mm-hmm. And when I thought about it a little more, I'm like, oh, well, Tamiya does a Corsair in 32nd, but there aren't any really big Hellcats. So it actually is kind of, I wonder if that's what their thought process was. We can kind of corner the market. But my general reaction to all this stuff is, where do people keep all these things? Yeah. I know you talked about that before, but it's amazing, all these giant models coming out. And yeah, the detail looks stunning. It looks great. Hellcat's an interesting subject, but big people must have much bigger houses than I do.
Well, and that's the way I'm thinking. And I've talked to previous guests about this, and this is definitely, it's one of the aspects of the hobby that's changing. You're getting people that who have the disposable income, who have the room, and as opposed to smaller scales where with fairly regular building you can turn out something in 2 weeks. You've got things like this where people don't mind spending months and months, and then they've got the room for it. So there's obviously a market. I know Airfix has been doing 1/24 for years. Yeah. But in terms of the actual, the fine details and stuff like that, I always think it's amazing. You're getting stuff now in 1/24 that, in the past, if you bought a kit, you then have to go and find an Edouard set or extra D. There's a lot of stuff coming in the box now, which, you could basically build these out of the box.
Yeah, the other thing that I noticed with the Hellcat kit is at first blush, I think it's like $150 or something. At first blush, it seems pretty expensive, but when you start figuring out the per part cost,
yes,
pretty.
Yeah.
Work down to cents on the part because there's just so many parts included.
Well, and that's where I tell people, make sure you check some of the Airfix channel on YouTube and that they go in behind the scenes on what's involved in that. And and I always say with the pricing, it's like anything else. They're going to have full, they're going to have the full retail price. I see on the Airfix site it's £119 expected May 2019. But you know as well as I do, within 6-7 months that's going to go down. You're going to be able to get it for a lower price, for people who want to wait.
I'm looking at the U.S. site. I'm trying to load here and see what they're saying $160 U.S., which for a 1/24 scale Hellcat, I know it seems like a lot of money, but I think that's actually a pretty decent price.
Yeah.
They've got the full engine, the accessory compartment. This looks like a beautiful kit.
Oh yeah, exactly. I know one guy in our local group. He builds almost exclusively U.S. Navy. Although he did accept a dare and built some armor and actually won an award at our last show. But he builds a lot of these, and I know he used to mock me for Airfix, but I'm looking forward to seeing him at the next meeting because he may have to admit he may have to get one because I'm sure he's kind of going, oh, that's very, very nice. And as you say, with the part count for the price, I still maintain you always have people that complain about price, but I maintain cut it down to, like, if you go to a concert or if you go out to dinner or something, that's over in a couple hours. Where else do you get so much bang for your buck? If you look at the number of hours we spend looking into this, building these things, it's still.
I completely agree. And I notice that anytime we take our daughter to the ballet or something, that we don't think much of dropping a couple $100, but that couple $100 kit is just so expensive. And I think we just need to kind of change our mind how we think about it. And days of it's 50 cents at the drugstore don't exist anymore.
No, exactly. And and I also say too, because we have similar debates at our club and I've seen them on the Facebook groups, there's still that market for lower price. If you want to have something, I've got a ton of them in my stash, but also if you want to do that, that's great. And no one in the end, if you don't like it, you don't like the price, don't buy it, and buy what you enjoy.
Airfix is really interesting in that they have the full range. You've got the $6 little Spitfire or Messerschmitt up to the $160 Hellcat and everywhere in between.
Well, and I think that's interesting is because they are moving. They're one of my favorite companies. I do have a soft spot for them because I'm the perpetual English kid that started off with his pocket money, going down to the drugstore and picking up my Spitfire kit. The company is really trying to up their game, much like I was saying with Italeri. They're trying to make people realize, yes, we can compete in this new market where the higher end, the higher detailing is where the money is. And there's been debates here, there, and everywhere about if the hobby's dying and all that, and it's not dying. It's just moving with the times.
And the other thing Airfix does for me is they just do all these interesting things I really enjoy. That's why I end up buying them, because they do subjects that really excite me.
Exactly. Okay, moving on to a possible other subject. I know I'm interested in this. A Spitfire Mark 14, 1/48 scale.
Yeah, I'm excited about that one.
Yeah, that looks good. I know it was announced previously, but they actually did have some parts in that there at the show. They showed the sprues and everything. With the Griffin engine. And people are saying it looks very, very good. The people that are really rivet counters on Spitfires I see are speaking favorably of it. Again, I fully admit I never will be a rivet counter as long as it looks close enough. But if it's making them happy, then hey, it must be all right.
I'm a big fan of the Mark 14 with the clipped wings and the bubble top. It just looks really, really cool.
Yeah, exactly.
It's hard to believe it's really the same as that Mark 1 Spitfire, but it's just a really cool airplane.
Yeah, exactly. It looks just gorgeous. Beautiful sound of it and all that. So yeah, this one I have a feeling there'll be an order from my local hobby shop. I'll be at some point getting one of those. Also in 148 scale news, Eduard released a new tool 148 scale Tempest Mark V. I think I've got an old Hasegawa kit of this somewhere in the stash. So again, I've always liked the look of the Tempest, the whole ground attack thing. So again, for those that like it, that looks like it's going to be a nice looking kit as well. Eduard always makes nice stuff.
Yeah, I've got a few of their Spitfires, both in 48 and 72,
yeah.
and they're beautiful. And I'm pretty excited about the Tempest. They did one, I don't know, a way long time ago, probably mid 90s, and this is all new, and they've really upped their game. Talk about a company that has upped their game from when they started. Eduard, early plastic kits were pretty scary, and now they're pretty much top of the line.
Exactly. I've got one of their 172nd Spitfires I finished up about a year ago, and again, just gorgeous. And the amount of extra bits and parts, options you can do. You know, I figure sooner or later, if you build enough Eduard kits, you then get enough to get a bonus. Like buy 10 and you can use the spare parts to build an 11th.
Yeah,
almost. The other thing I really noted about this is very cool looking box art. It shows it in the process of trying to do what the Spitfires did into a V1, you know, shooting up a V1 or something, or tipping the wing over. So again, very nice looking kit. Okay.
One of the things my wife gives me a hard time about all the time is I am such the sucker for Eduard's boxing, as they do the different boxings and they do special boxings, or they throw a book in there, or they put some decals in there. It's pretty much a guarantee to get my money, and I need to learn to resist that. But they do such a good job of their packaging, their instructions, their box art. Even sometimes they threw the books in there. It's pretty impressive.
So I'll have to check the podcast logs, because if we see stuff coming from Eduard's IP address, we know they're listening.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, you'll be doomed. Okay, just moving on a bit. The Scalemates.com hot kit discussion. Pretty well everything we've covered here today. That's pretty standard. Couple of other things being talked about. I guess there was some new Games Workshop Imperial Knights that came out. Some of these larger kits. I know my previous guest, John Bias, he actually enjoys building those. A lot of discussion about that. Some new German armor coming out. A Russian manufacturer, they have a Sukhoi 57 coming out from Zavesta in 1/72 scale. That's always an attractive looking kit, and the potential box art there looks interesting, so people will be talking about that. So yeah, pretty well all the normal stuff. The Wingnut Wings Lancaster. Rye Field Models has a Jagdpanther G2 coming out, continuation of their series with a full interior. So I know the armor guys have been building the King Tigers, and they're looking forward to that. So that should be a fun one as well. So that's what's happening in the...
Just to jump in, one of the ones that's on the list, the Lockheed U2 by AFV Club, a friend of mine got some test shots, and I got to see that kit yesterday.
Oh, yeah? And?
Really well done.
Yeah, that's going to be a big kit.
You know, it didn't strike me as too big. I think it's manageable because it's only 148, but it looked nice. It's got a long wingspan, though. It's going to take up a lot of shelf space.
Well, that's what I figure in that scale. And aren't they coming out? I think they were also coming out with another variation of that one. The same company. I thought I saw a couple of weeks ago. I saw two things on Scalemates, similar, two different variations of it. So yeah, but again, gorgeous looking aircraft. One of my favorite aircrafts. I think I built, was it Test, or someone built one again 30 years ago. I remember cobbling it together, and it wasn't bad either. Probably Monogram, way back in the dark ages of modeling. So okay.
The other thing I'll bring to your attention, is the Gloucester Pioneer, which is the early British Gloucester Whittle jet. A company called Clearprop, who I haven't heard of, is doing one in 1/72.
Okay.
And a very neat video showing the parts going together that I saw on YouTube.
Yes. Okay. I just searched it on Scalemates. Now I know what you're talking about. We have a guy in our club that builds a lot of resin stuff in that, and I think he's worked on one of these. So maybe after the show, you'll have to throw the link in, the Scalemates link, and we'll add that. Yeah, this is an attractive looking aircraft. I love this. Yeah.
I also love the irony of a new company called Clearprop, whose first aircraft is a jet.
Well, it makes sense, right? Maybe it got lost in the translation, or they knew
Yeah.
exactly what they were doing. Oh, here it is. Okay, I just found it on ScaleMates. Oh, that is a Trek. Now, is it going to come with the engine on a stand, as per the box art?
It looks like it does. There's a video. If you scroll down, there is a video that you can find that shows
Okay.
kind of.
Yeah.
I don't know if
Okay.
it's actual parts or CAD, but if you got a chance, check that out.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, we'll definitely check that out as well. I see we have the link there. So yeah, that looks great. Okay, so that's all the what's hot and all that. All right, so now we're going to feature an interview with our guest host here, Jim. So as we said, Jim, we gave you the intro and all that. I've been following your blog for quite a while. So you are a Canadian boy, but you're now living down in Seattle, just over the border. How long have you been down there?
I have been in the United States since 1986. I've been in Seattle since 2014.
Okay.
And being I am a good Ontario boy,
Attaboy.
I like to tell everybody that this is the furthest north I've ever lived, is Seattle.
Yes.
And people look at me funny because I don't think they quite get the geography of Ontario.
Yes,
So.
exactly. Yeah, you go down to Point Pelee and you're similar latitude in Northern California. Exactly.
Right.
So excellent. Yeah, you're not far from the border, and yeah, how far is the border?
Vancouver's about 3 hours north. In fact, I was just up there a couple weeks ago for their IPMS show, which had some beautiful models.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually posted something. Kind of my review of the show was posted on a friend's website. So
very cool.
It's, a lot of modeling. And you were talking about the Gundams and the Warhammer stuff. That's the one thing I noticed. I used to be in the Midwest, and moving out here, they are very popular in Vancouver and here in Seattle. We actually have a store in Seattle that is just a Gundam store.
Mm-hmm. There's actually a few like that in Toronto now. It's a very big area of the hobby, and if you're a manufacturer, you better be paying attention because the sales of that are just, especially in the Far East, are just absolutely huge. That's what drives a lot of companies like Bandai, their revenue and stuff like that. So yeah, big area. It's something I've started to explore. At some point, I want to have a round table of various, manufacturers and builders when we talk about, where the hobby's going and that is a huge area. We noticed we just had our Southwestern Ontario Scale Model Show in September, and we noticed a lot more of that. And we have some people that build a lot of them now. I think I've built 2 so far just to try them out, and I can see why people like them. They go together easy. They're posable. Easy to paint. The manufacturers, huge amount of support behind them. And as you say, there are stores that are dedicated. I love it. We have a store in London, and that's pretty well all he sells, along with other, Japanese anime comics and stuff like that. It's called Neo Tokyo, but it's the only place I can get a Mr. Color paint out of all my local hobby stores. So,
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I do stop into the Gundam store is just so I can get some of my Mr. Color products. I was just in there last Saturday and picking up some of the neat stuff that the hobby shop doesn't have, but the Gundam store does.
Yep. Well, like I said, I swear by the model. I swear by the thinner, the model leveling, the leveling thinner. Absolutely good on my Tamiya or the Mr. Color. Okay, right. So let's start with the questions we ask everyone who's on the show. When did you first get in the hobby?
My first kit I remember was an Airfix F-86 Sabre that I built when I was a kid. I had a couple uncles that were into aviation. My dad was into aviation and started building models as a kid. And it's the same story you probably hear every time somebody's on here. I built as a kid. And then I like to say, most people say they got into cars and girls. I got into airplanes and girls. I started getting my pilot's license, and the modeling went by the wayside. Did my schooling, and I picked it up again a little bit when I was studying for the bar exam after graduating from law school, and then got back into it.
Awesome.
So, typical story everybody has, and it was amazing. Probably the last model I built was in 89, 90. And then to come back in, I guess, 97, 98, even in those few short years, how much everything had changed. The whole resin photo etch thing never existed, and it just blew me away what it did. And it's only gotten exponentially crazier since then. It's amazing how much it's changed since I was younger.
Oh, yeah, very much so. And that's a similar thing. And it seems to be a common theme. And this is where I say the hobby's certainly not dying. It's just moving on. It realizes there's a lot more builders with a lot more disposable income. If you want to drop, hundreds on it. I think back there's a couple of guys out of Australia called On the Bench, and they do a great podcast. We've been in touch a few times, and one of the guys there, he's building I think it's a 1/350th Japanese aircraft carrier that was at Pearl Harbor. I'm not going to remember the name off the top of my head, but he spent, let's say, 200 on the kit, and he's apparently spent 800 Australian dollars just on the aftermarket stuff. But like he's just completely kitting this out, and he had a picture actually he posted to his Facebook page, or the page of some of the photo etch. So they've got the little 20 millimeter guns or 40 millimeter guns, and they're 11 parts per gun. And these things literally, you could barely put the entire gun on the tip of an X-Acto knife.
Yeah, I listened to those guys as well, and I think there must be something wrong with all of them, because to me, photo etch is the scariest thing in the world, and they act like it's a benefit. To me, it's distraction. Anytime I get a kit, there's photo etch in there. Unless it's flat, I'm like, I'm not dealing with that. Those guys act like it's like a good thing.
I know. Sure. Go ahead.
I just said they love their photo etch, I guess.
Oh, they do. But, again, if you like it and you're into that, it's, some amazing work you can do with it. So, yeah, we like giving a shout out to those guys, the crazy Australians. We'll have to see. We'll have to see if we make a mention, because I know they all listen into us as well. So that's pretty cool. So what made you decide to start writing about the hobby and posting stuff to the internet and stuff like that?
So that's a really good question. And my first answer was I like writing. And then I realized in the back of my head that my wife would yell at me for saying that. I guess the answer is I feel compelled to write about stuff. I don't know if I actually enjoy the process, but I feel like it's something I have to do to make sense of the world. And I started the blog a long, long time ago, before they became more common. And I guess the way I kind of approach the hobby is I'm a big history researcher. I'm probably a frustrated museum curator, and since I can't have my own museum of warbirds, I do it in 1/72nd scale. And I just decided, hey, let's write about kind of the historical side of modeling. And what I find interesting is there's so many different ways to approach the hobby, and it almost feels to me the people who approach it from the historical side and write about the history are becoming lesser and lesser, and it's becoming more about the weathering and the detail. And I don't have the skills to do the weathering and the highly detailed stuff. And I'm more interested in the contextual history. And I do a lot researching, writing. As I said, I've written a few things about some RCAF pilots, about the hurricane. I just finished up a project for IPMS Canada on the T-34 Mentor, and going way out of my comfort zone, the Sherman tank.
Oh, wow.
And, the Sherman tank I found a picture of some Shermans, Canadian Shermans, in 1971 driving through downtown Oshawa, and it just fascinated me. And it turned out that they were some of the last Shermans in service in Canada, and we ended up doing a free members decal sheet for IPMS Canada with those Shermans on it. And it was quite the interesting project of these funky tanks driving around a year before I was born in my hometown, when they were from 1941. So it was kind of a neat project. But what it made me realize is Shermans are complex, and you can't just build one out of the box, apparently.
Yeah, that's what I've understood too. When I got back in, I was mostly building aircraft, but I did want to get back into armor, and I decided, this particular Dragon Sherman kit looked interesting, and apparently, according to some of the armor guys, particularly on the tracks, it was the absolute worst choice. But I got it done, and I have a whole new appreciation for it now.
Yeah, I started building a little bit of armor in my spare time, just as something fun. And other than 1/72nd scale armor is tiny, it's kind of an interesting diversion. But getting back to the blog, I write. I'm going to keep myself from saying I like to write. I like to present history. I think that the Canadian experience in both modeling and to some extent aviation history doesn't get the exposure it did.
Right.
So I just tried to do that. And kind of my own take on these things. And I think I probably write more about real subjects than modeling, and I've not been good about it recently, just because of time and life, and we all have a million things going on.
Yep.
But I also the other reason is I'm an attorney, so I write a lot for work. And I find myself, if I don't do writing for fun things or on the side, I write like a lawyer all the time. And it's kind of a way to prevent myself from constantly being a lawyer, and maybe exercise my creative side a little bit, I guess.
That's understandable. I can certainly see that. So we touched upon this already briefly. We were talking about photo etch, but what are your favorite and least favorite parts of the build process?
I think my favorite is the finishing.
Right.
No, I like construction. Not a big fan of filling and sanding, but I like to see the airplane come together. Love putting the decals on, and then it becomes a real thing. I have a love-hate relationship with painting. I kind of hate the painting, but I like the way it looks at the end.
Yep.
Just about the only thing, the thing that scares me the most are photo etch and canopy masking. So
Right.
Ed canopy masks have been the greatest manna from heaven ever, because that way I can just stick them out and stick them on.
Yep, exactly. Anything you can use to help. Sometimes if you're into doing that, more power to you. But yeah, I'd rather spend the $10 and just get on with it.
Oh, to me, it's the best $10 ever spent. If I can just do them, stick them on, and I don't have to stress about it.
Yeah, I've got a Hasegawa 1/72nd scale Lancaster dam busters, and the first thing I bought as aftermarket is the masking set.
I have the other. I have actually the Hasegawa Lancaster, not the dam buster, and that's the first thing in the box. And
Yeah.
I've got so many boxes in the stash that I just buy the masks and throw them in there. So I'm out. And believe it or not, it actually, when I'm looking for something to build, if I pull something down and there's not a masking set for it, sometimes it goes back into the closet rather than, oh, that one has a set, that one doesn't.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you're saying. Okay, so we've also touched briefly on where the hobby is going and all that. What if you think ahead, let's say 5 years, what challenges, or what's the largest challenge, or maybe challenges, do you see what's going to happen with the hobby over the next little while?
Well, my tongue-in-cheek answer would be we're all going to run out of space with these giant kits.
Yes.
I think that's going to be a problem. Now, honestly, I don't know. I kind of feel that I'm kind of lost in the past of modeling. And when I was listening to talk to John and all these guys who are building these Gundams, that's not really something that interests me. I think we are going to see, I do think as time goes on, the stuff that interests some of us, the armor, the aviation, I think is going to go by the wayside.
Right.
And one of the things living in Seattle is interesting is aviation is such ingrained in this city because of Boeing, and so many people work for Boeing. But I think for a lot of people, aviation doesn't provide the same. It's so common. It's just what they grew up with. And I think we'll see as time goes on. I do think we're going to see a lot of shift away from some of this stuff. The biggest surprise to me, just across the board, has been Wingnut Wings and this resurgence of World War I. I never would have guessed that 10 years ago. World War I would become such a big deal.
Yeah.
So who knows? I've been surprised before. I'll probably be surprised again. You know, as people like to say, the hobby's dying. I don't see it. I'm amazed at the products that come out, and it's also been revolutionary to be able to buy everything sitting in your pajamas in your house. Buy everything
exactly.
you need. Like I bought a decal sheet for a Charles Lindbergh Corsair from the Czech Republic using PayPal. It's amazing the access we have to things that we have 20 years ago. It's utterly unbelievable.
And I also like to say, if you go back to Wingnut Wings, it's essentially, Peter Jackson, he had a passion for World War I, and he said, I'm not able to, scratch that itch, so I'll make my own company. And being able to have, so many of these cottage industries coming out now, it really, as you say, you really are hard pressed not to find a subject or something that can at least help you to make that subject. So going on with subjects, is there anything particular that you would really love to see either released or re-released?
That's a good question. I joke all the time that when I make it big, I'm going to start my own model company. And our first kit's going to be an Avro Anson. Our second kit's going to be a Fleet Fort. And our third kit's going to be Bankruptcy. I am really, a lot of the things I'm interested in, actually, I'll tell you a story in a second. A lot of the things I'm interested in are so esoteric. It always blows my mind anytime the kits come out. And it happened to me recently. So I build a lot of RCAF stuff. And I like the trainers and some of the second line things. And within a year period, RS Models did a North American Yale, which is the fixed wing T6. Special Hobby did a Northrop Delta. And then Airfix did their B-25. And I'm thinking those are three things that were so exciting that I never thought I would see outside of maybe resin or a vacuform or something.
Right.
So I'm just constantly surprised at the items that come out. But I'd love to see a Canadian Avro Anson. I know there's no market for that. And I know most of the things I love, there's real no market for. So the one and this gets back to the Hurricane thing, I would really love to see somebody do a nice 1/32nd scale Hawker Hurricane, because that's one of the things I would break down and go big for. That would be really neat. Outside of that, I think it's just amazing. Every day you wake up and there's something new announced, and I'm like, I've got enough kits, and even with the stuff coming out, that'll keep me busy for 5 years. So
Yeah,
I
exactly. We've got a guy in our club, Michael Hill. He's probably listening. He doesn't know, but I am going to get him on the show. And he builds a lot of resin and stuff like that. Again, the weird esoterical subjects. And I remember him saying too, there's times where he never thought he'd see a kit in regular plastic, and sure enough, one comes out. But he still goes and buys the old school vacuform and all that, just because just like our friends in Australia enjoy photo etch. He enjoys putting on the face mask and sanding the resin.
yeah.
Exactly.
To me, for a long time, I always thought the biggest hole in 72nd scale was probably the B25, the early model, and then Airfix put that out. And it still actually a little bit flummoxes me they haven't done a Doolittle Raider boxing of that, because I think that would sell like crazy here in the United States.
Well, you never know. Airfix, if you're listening.
Know. Who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, there's just so much. It's amazing. I have to keep myself from just buying everything that's interesting because it's just so much. So.
I know. It's that whole money thing. It just gets in the way. I tell you, terrible.
6 or 8 months. Maybe I could catch up.
Okay, tell me a bit about your book you're working on with the hurricane.
Okay, so as I said, about many, many years ago, I went to see a hurricane fly for the first time, and it just kind of blew my mind. And then about 10 years ago now, I picked up a book that was talking about the Canadian history of the hurricane, and it kind of frustrated me because it was repetitive of the same stories we've been hearing that looked like they were aped from a 1950s, 1960s British book, and they didn't make sense. So
Right.
dug into a 10-year research project that ended up most recently 3 articles, 3 copies of the IPMS Canada magazine Random Thoughts, and I'm in process of expanding into a book. And it's kind of a fascinating story. One story people don't know about that probably is somewhat topical is the hurricanes were built in Thunder Bay, and the head of that production was a female engineer named Elsie McGill.
Okay.
And the Hurricane was the first aircraft Canadian Car and Foundry built in any number. They built a few things here and there, and then World War II start building this project, and it becomes intertwined. No engines were built in Canada, so they could build these airframes but didn't have any engines. And it just became this fascinating thing. And what frustrated me is most of what is published has been incorrect or misleading or not the full story. And that's not to sit here and say I'm anywhere near getting to the full story. I'm doing the best I can.
Right.
And one of my favorite stories is after the 3rd article got published in IPMS Canada, all kinds of new materials showed up. So it feels like no matter what I publish, the minute I do it, the cool stuff will show up. But it was very kind of image-driven, kind of looking at it like the modeler. And I think it's a fascinating story. And I'm not sure that even what I have, we're anywhere close to the full story, but it's better than what we had. But it's not the full story, and it's just amazing. And I'm just interested. The Spitfire is beautiful, and I love it. But the Hurricane is just kind of this somewhat lesser talked about aircraft.
Right. But it's just as capable, had more kills and all that. So I'm going to put you on the spot. When do we think we're going to see that out?
I'm a big procrastinator, so let's say 2 to 5 years. And if you were betting, I would say in the 5-year period. I thought I was closer than I was, and then I got a zip drive of another 100 and some hurricane photos handed to me a few weeks ago. So,
oh dear.
Never ending.
Yeah.
And I'm still trying to figure out what's the best way to publish this.
Right. Well, you have a lot of options now. That's one thing that's nice.
So we'll see how it goes. And I'm slow. And as I said, I don't really like to write.
Yeah, so all right. Well, if we're still around in 2 to 5 years, you got to let us know when you're going to release it, and we'll have you on definitely to plug it.
Yep, we'll do.
Okay. So I always ask people for some websites or YouTube channels you recommend, and again, under the category of Great Minds Think Alike, I'm familiar with all these. So why don't you just walk us through these?
Well, the first one is Model Paint Solutions, which is a company a friend of mine, John, started. And if you go on there, you'll see my review of the IPMS Vancouver site. And I've done some of my writing for him. I've done a few reviews for him. But what is really impressive is John is an excellent airbrusher, and he has some very detailed articles on airbrushing and he has also become involved with selling Mission Models paint, which is acrylic. And I have been thinking, I love the Mr. Color. It's great stuff, but I don't want to be breathing all this stuff. I live in a smaller place. The family comes home. They're not so happy when it smells like paint fumes. So I've been slowly transitioning to the acrylics. And these Mission Models paints seem interesting. And John has a lot of just very detailed. He's a scientist by nature, and he's very, very methodical in his approach to painting, as opposed to me. I scored some of this, and then when I can't repeat it, and so I think that's really interesting. And then you had mentioned YouTube channels. There's two called, one's called Plasmo, and he is somewhere in Eastern Europe, I think, and just an amazing builder. And Scale Model Aircraft, I think it is, not airport, which is another guy from Europe who just he builds these models, and I'm amazed how easy they make it look.
Oh yeah, but you know what? But see, again, that's what's great in terms of the reference. Now you can subscribe to these channels, and both of these I'm actually a subscriber to, and I actually Model Paint Solutions I discovered a few months ago, and I was just really amazed. And again, I've used some of the tutorials and that, but we're in such a time where a lot of the reference stuff is so easily available to us now. That it's easy to use, and some absolutely great things. Okay, we're gonna
just to jump in. It's also interesting with the YouTube stuff is you can see people doing it, and you can watch their techniques, and you can see how they do things, and that might work for me. That's not going to work for me, and it's awesome to sit down and see how other people do things, just to get different viewpoints.
Well, yeah, and that's one thing I always encourage new people into the hobby, and that try different things. Just because someone does it one way, try it different ways and see what works for you. There's no one right way to do it.
Right.
Okay, moving on. We're almost done here. We're going to just quickly cover what's on the bench. I've still got my very old school Tamiya 135th Panther. I've got a gloss coat on it now. Next is the weathering, and then I've got a really old school Hasegawa 172nd F-18 Hornet in progress. I am going to build it up as a CF-18. I've been doing some filling today on the wing roots. This kit, it's a popular kit. They've made about 50 variations, mostly with decals, but it does have some fit issues, I have to admit. There was a little bit of swearing, and out came the filler and stuff like that, but it's, for its age, it's not bad. So I've got the basic look together, but we're definitely into some filling and sanding time now with it. Jim, what do you have?
Well, first I'll say I built that Hornet back in like 1988 when I was in high school, and I swore never again. So I'm sorry to hear that you are running into the same problems. I have actually a little bit been struggling. I've not made any progress. I've been pulling things off the bench and putting things on, and I've got so I picked off a Tamiya Zero, which I'm doing as a Zero that still exists. It's still airworthy down in California, because I thought, well, if you're struggling, the best thing to do is get a nice Tamiya kit, and it is unbelievably beautiful. Yep. And it's been really interesting, and I've got to see that airplane fly, so that's quite attractive. And then the second thing that I should be working on, and I'm not doing enough on, is we have a local club here in Seattle that meets at the Museum of Flight, and in exchange for getting to meet at the Museum of Flight, we do displays for the Museum of Flight. And earlier this year, I had done one on Canadian aviation. Currently, we have one on World War I, which has a lot of wingnet kits in it. And we are doing one called Real Planes, which are planes from the movies. And I was asked to do a Hawker Hunter that was in the right stuff that appeared for about 3 seconds that was playing the part of the Douglas 558.
Okay.
So the Hunter White put a nose probe on it, so I'm doing that. And really need to get moving, because that display, I think, goes in next month, so I'm way behind.
So you're working on that as well. Okay. Under sites and tips, I realized I looked at my bookmark list. A lot of the paint manufacturers and the aftermarket stuff, a lot of their sites, it's worth checking out, even if you're not ordering directly. So if we look at Ammo, AK, Vallejo, they have a lot of good tutorials and downloads on their sites. It's actually quite worth for people to, spend an hour or so sometime and have a look. Because I've been using the Vallejo stuff for a while, and I know AK and some of the other ones have it as well, and it's really kind of cool, because quite often, particularly if you're an armor builder and stuff like that, and you're trying to figure out A, how to use their products, but B, to kind of give you some hints and tips to kind of get over the initial hesitation, they've got some darn good stuff out there.
Yeah, I've noticed. I've been to the MIG site, and they've got some nice PDFs on different topics.
Yeah.
Building armor, building aircraft, how to do specific things. So that's kind of a neat thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I know other sites do as well. I just gave 3 there in the links. But as always, if you find something else you really want, feel free to let us know. So, Jim, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today. It's been an absolute pleasure for you sitting in the guest host seat.
Well, thank you very much. And if you don't mind, we have actually never mentioned that my blog is called ascalecanadian.com.
Yes, we should actually put that in. I'm going to put that in your bio as well.
Okay, and I forgot to put it in my bio. And then to put a little plug, we have a big show here in Seattle at the Museum of Flight. It is February 16th through 17th next year.
Okay.
And we're called the Northwest Scale Modelers. We have it's called our spring show, though it's in February. And I do have the show flyer. It is just a display. It is not a contest. So if there's anybody who by, and we are going to have a special guest, which is modeler Chris Buchholz, who's got a new P-47 book coming out.
Nice.
So it's a real fun weekend. We set up all our tables under the SR-71 at the museum, and it's just 2 whole days of modeling extravaganza.
Yep. Sounds like the similar fun our sister chapter at IPMS Hamilton, Ontario have at the Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum. Some similar stuff there. So what we'll do is we'll make sure we put both those links. We'll put them just under your bio. In the show notes, and then when I edit the podcast tonight, we'll make sure we have it up for people. So as I said, we really appreciate you coming on. At some point, we'll have to get you back on. It's always good. I always love hearing different people's opinions from around the world about the state of our hobby and all that, because it is a worldwide thing. So, all right.
Well,
so
thank you very much.
Yep. So don't forget to subscribe. Let us know if you have any comments or suggestions about the podcast. You can reach me at scalemodelpodcast@gmail.com. It's currently recorded roughly bi-weekly, and we're available wherever your favorite podcasts are found, including iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Feel free to leave a rating. The higher, the better. We always like that. Be honest, though. It does help get the page further up the list and in front of more eyeballs, shall we say. We do have a Facebook page at facebook.com/Scale Model Podcast, and I'm also publishing extra video content. I'm just playing around with that when I go to shows and things like that. That's more of a visual thing, and we have a YouTube channel, and the links also in the show notes as well. So for episode 8 of the Scale Model Podcast, my name is Stuart Clark.
I'm Jim Bates.
Thank you, and be well.